Okay, Jared, thanks. Hey, Jared, just before we begin, since I'm a participant in the Zoom meeting, I'm just asking for the sake of the public, can the public see all of the participants in the meeting?
No.
Okay, maybe I should just go quickly over a list of who's on the call for the members of the public.
Sure.
Yeah, okay. All right, good evening, everyone. My name is Dan McKiernan, the director at the Division of Marine Fisheries, and you're attending, as you probably know, a public hearing regarding a recent emergency action taken by the Division of Marine Fisheries to adopt the Atlantic States Marine Fisheries Commission's emergency action to reduce striped bass harvest for this season. Because it's a virtual meeting, as Jared just mentioned, you may not know who all is on the call, so I'm going to take some liberties and just go over the list. I'm Dan McKiernan, the director. I see Mike Armstrong. He's going to be giving the technical presentation tonight. I see Khalil Bogdan. He is one of the members of our Marine Fisheries Advisory Commission, as is Mike Pierdenach. He's also a member of our Marine Fisheries Advisory Commission and also a member of the New England Fisheries Management Council. Jared Silver is our policy analyst and regulations expert for marine fisheries. We also have from the environmental police, Matt Bass and Pat Moran.
Chris Baker as well.
Oh, and Chris Baker. I haven't gotten down to that list. I'm kind of scrolling down. We also have from DMF, Assistant Director Story Reed, biologist Matt Ayer, and Recreational Program Manager Ben Gahagan, Nicola Meserve, who's the policy analyst who deals with a lot of the ASMFC species. And that's the extent of it. So
Chairman,
go ahead.
you have Ray Kane, Chairman of the
I'm sorry, Chairman, I missed Ray. So sorry, Chairman Ray Kane. So anyway, so those three members of the Marine Fisheries Advisory Commission are expected to take a final vote on this matter among their other 6 colleagues. It's a 9-member commission. And so 3 of them are participating in the meeting tonight.
Among the attendees, we have George Gendron, Chris McCaulson, and Matthew Hawk.
Great. Okay. So Jerry, do we have a slide of our legal requirements? There you go. Thank you. So tonight's hearing is being held under the authority of Chapter 130, Section 17, also Chapter 30A, which is the Standard Administrative Procedures Act, to amend striped bass regulations at 322 CMR 6.07 to change the recreational fishing measures for striped bass. We implemented these regs on May 26th, and under state law, such an action can be done for no more than 90 days. And in order to extend that regulation beyond 90 days, we need to have a hearing such as this and a vote by the Marine Fisheries Advisory Commission to approve it as a final rule. Mike's going to talk about what the actual rule changes were. I'm not going to get into that at this point. This hearing is the only public hearing, and it's going to include a comment period, which is open and is going to remain open through June 30th, 2023 at 5 p.m. And then on July 10th, we convene our Marine Fisheries Advisory Commission to take a vote on whether this will become a final action, a final rule for the remainder of the year beyond the 90-day period. And that final action would be under the authority of Chapter 130, Section 17A. So tonight we're going to talk briefly about management and the stock status, what the 2022 removals look like, the action that was taken by the Atlantic States Marine Fisheries Commission, and then some prognosis for 2024 going forward. We can take some technical questions or clarifying questions, and then we can accept your comments on the record. And this will become part of what we send to our Marine Fisheries Advisory Commission for their final rule. Next slide, please. There we go. I think at this point, I'll turn it over to Dr. Armstrong. Thank you, Mike.
Thank you, Dan. Let me bring you through what got us here in the last few years. So in 2019, we had a benchmark stock assessment. and it found the stock was overfished and overfishing was occurring, meaning the biomass was too low and the rate of removal of fish was too high. And that was using data through 2017. We put in an addendum that reduced fishing mortality. The target was 18% reduction. And that's when we put in the 28 to less than 35-inch slot for the ocean, and then an 18-inch minimum size one bag in Chesapeake Bay. And then the commercial quota was reduced 18%. And we approved some conservation equivalencies. And also we put in a rule requiring circle hooks when using bait. And I'm going to go through this pretty fast. I don't know if the members of public have seen, there has been 4 public hearings by ASMFC that covered a little bit of this. So I'm going to go through it fast, but you can ask questions at the end. Next, please. So May of 22nd, we put in Amendment 7, and that updated the triggers for rebuilding and for looking at recruitment and use of conservation equivalency and some other stuff, while maintaining all the things put in with Amendment 6. So there was a stock assessment update in November 2022, and that was through 2021 data. And then there was a rebuilding projections done in just May of this year, using all the way through 2022 data. And keep in mind that we do have a deadline. Once we're declared overfished, we have 10 years to rebuild. And so the goal is to rebuild by 2029. Next. So the stock assessment was good, and using data through 2021. We were not overfishing, so fishing mortality rate was low. We were not overfished. The SSB wasn't at the target, but it was above the threshold. I'm sorry, below the threshold. So we weren't overfishing, but we were still in an overfish condition. But there was a high probability of rebuilding by 2029 based on projections on these data. Next. So at our, what was it, January meeting, we were looking at data, and it became apparent preliminary data for 2022 was really high harvest. And we didn't get the final estimates till about May. But what it indicated was in 2022, we had a 38% overall increase in removals relative to 21. But the big thing was an almost doubling of the recreational harvest, 88% increase in the harvest. Now, there's only a 3% increase in live release mortalities, and I'll talk about that later, and that's probably due to this poor year classes in the smaller sizes that are coming along. And that's troubling, and that contributes to why we did this emergency measure, and I'll talk about that in a second. The commercial harvest did not increase at all. So the rec harvest almost doubled. The commercial harvest did not increase because it's under a hard quota and they shut down. Next, please. So anyway, we asked the TC to take these new removal estimates and put it in the rebuilding projections, because the last projection said things were pretty good. F was low. Well, the new projection said F was a bit higher. And when it was using the mortality rate from the last assessment, there was a 97% probability of rebuilding by 2029. Looked good. It was good. When we use the new fishing mortality rate coming with a doubling of harvest, there was less than a 15% probability of rebuilding. And you can see that in sort of the orangish line. We get above the threshold, we never make the target. And if you extend it out, you'll actually see a downturning of the biomass at the current fishing mortality. And that's because of some of the poor year classes coming in. So we looked at that and said, we need to do something, and we need to do something quick. Next, please. So at the May meeting, the Striped Bass Management Board approved an emergency action to implement a 31-inch maximum size for all recreational fisheries. The only thing excluded was the Chesapeake Bay trophy fisheries, which wouldn't have been affected by this rule under emergency action. So for the coast, the rule with the 31-inch maximum size, our slot became 28 inches to less than 31, going from 28 to 35, 28 to 31. This emergency action lasts for 180 days. It can be renewed. And it required that the states implement this new rule as quickly as possible and no later than July 2nd. And so we've already implemented it, which is why we're here tonight to get comments on the new rule we put in. There is, for some, all the states are trying hard to get it in. Most have got it in. There's one that's maybe doesn't want to put it in. We'll just have to see. If you were non-compliant with this rule, the federal government can shut down your entire fishery. We certainly don't want that to happen. So everything else remained the same, just the slot limit changed. Next. Let's see. So this was a response to this rather stunning increase in the recreational harvest and the new rebuilding projections, which are a little bit grim. So the intent was to reduce the harvest of the 2015 year class to support rebuilding. The large harvest was driven in part, mostly, by a very strong year class, which was 2015. It's very strong and it stands out among poor or modest year classes. So it's what we have left to rebuild the stock with, and we need to husband it along. And I'll show you a pretty stunning picture of this in relation to slot size. So they are 31.5 inches this year. And so almost all of this year class will be dead center in the old slot of 28 to 35. So I say, if you like the harvest in 22, which doubled, you will love it in 2023 because it will be much higher if we did nothing. And the rebuilding schedule at 15% would go even lower. I don't even know, it would go to 0. So anyway, this 31-inch maximum protects over half that 2015 year class, prevents it from being harvested. The other problem is concurrent with this, and this isn't even addressed in this emergency action, is we have 4 year classes coming along and maybe 5, and I'll show you those in a second. So we're going to address this problem of trying to rebuild, and there's going to be more problems. So if we didn't do these actions, we'd be behind the 8 ball even further when we try to address the incoming poor recruitment. Next. So this slide on the top is a look at the old slot limit, which is 28 to 35. The red is the size of the fish last year. The blue is the size of this 2015 this year. So you can see maybe 2/3 of it was in the slot last year, and that caused a doubling of landings. This year, at 31.5 inches, they are dead center. Almost the entire year class is available for harvest. I don't know how harvest wouldn't have gone up in a fairly significant amount. So what we did, the new slot limit, you can see the red and the blue are the same, but we've slid the top over to 31 inches. So we're now cutting off about 60% of the 2015 year class cannot be harvested. And there's some preliminary estimates coming out of the technical committee, somewhere between 25 and 50% of harvest should be reduced by this, but we'll have to see. Next. And then I told you about the poor recruitment. That's the number of young that are born and survive each year. And you can see it's highly variable. But the troubling thing is the last 4 years, starting in 2019, have been really poor. And that question mark is for 23. We hear bad things about this survey. They do hundreds and hundreds of SANEs in Chesapeake Bay. It has never been wrong in predicting the strength of the year class coming in. And right now, the people in Chesapeake Bay are pessimistic. So it could be not 4 bad year classes, 5, which is going to be challenging. Next. So we took this emergency action. I'm not going to go for the sake of brevity. There is a proposal, a provision under the ASMFC charter that you can do an emergency action. It has to be when there's unanticipated changes in the ecosystem, the stock or fishery. We regarded a doubling of the harvest unexpectedly as a change, and so we went forward. Required a 2/3 vote. In fact, it got a 15 in favor and only one opposed. That was New Jersey. So it is now effective for 180 days and could be extended for 2 one-year periods. Now, also, when you do an emergency action, you have to start an addendum. So there is an addendum initiated, addendum 2. Next, please. So this isn't really part of this public hearing because the addendum is being developed, and we will come back with a public hearing dedicated just to addendum 2. So this is considering, in addition to the 2023 emergency actions, do we want to do some other things? And the goal is to get the F or the removals down to 0.17 in 2024. That's consistent with rebuilding by 2029. We'll look at modifying slot limits, closures, seasonal closures, more maximum size limits in Chesapeake Bay, commercial fisheries, maybe change the size limit. And let's see. Oh, I'm sorry. And the last option is, it gets complicated here. So there is a stock assessment towards the end of next year. If it says things are bad, if we want to react to it, we have to do another addendum, and that'll take 1.5 years or a year. And we don't have the time for that with these things, all these things going on. And so part of the addendum is an option to bypass the public hearing process. Not our favorite thing to do, but for expediency, we put that in and we hope it will pass and be available as an option if the stock assessment is bad. Next. The timeline is the plan, what they call the plan development team and the technical committee are developing options right now. They will bring a draft for public for comment. I'm sorry, in August, they will bring a draft to the board, and we either approve it for public comment or send it back for more work. We hope to send it out for public comment in August. Let's see. If the draft is approved for public comment in August, sorry, public hearings and comments will be in the fall, probably in September. Next. So anyway, this is all about the emergency action. I've laid out the case of why we went that way. We thought it was awfully urgent and couldn't wait for an addendum to change that, which would have taken 1.5 years. So we did emergency action, and we now have a slot size from 28 to 31. So are there any questions sort of about the technical aspects or why we did something? And you can probably incorporate it. You can do comments and questions at the same time since we don't have a lot of public.
Yeah, so Mike, just a clarifying question for me, because it came up in last night's New Jersey hearing. You'd mentioned the Chesapeake Bay tropical fishery was not affected. And is that because the fish were already harvested in the first 4 months of the year prior to the,
Yes,
yeah.
yeah,
okay.
that fishery is short-lived in the spring, just a
Mhm.
couple of weeks, and it would have
Right.
been over. So
Very
yeah,
All right, so Mike, maybe we can take any questions from the Marine Fisheries Advisory Commission participants first and then go to the public.
whatever you want, sure.
Okay, any other commission members have any clarifying questions? Mike Piernock?
Thank you, Dan, and thank you, Mike, for your presentation. You noted that if one of these states is not in compliance, that they will be shut down. Is that when you say the entire fishery, is that all fishing in state waters, recreational and commercial?
My
Yes.
understanding is it's supposed to be. It's a pretty draconian action.
Mike, I think Nicola may have some experience with that, but Mike Piernock, I believe it would be all striped bass fishing. It wouldn't be fishing for other species. Nicola, do you want to weigh in on that?
Sure, you're correct, Dan. It would be both, but it would apply to both sectors, recreational and commercial, striped bass fishing. And there are, vessels that don't heed those rules can be forfeited, and there can be monetary fines if a harvest continues to occur after the federal moratorium is enacted.
Great, thanks.
So Mike, an update of that is New Jersey was the outlier, and their Marine Fisheries Commission voted 5-2 to move the emergency action ahead. They had balked last time they met. There's apparently still some other panel that can weigh in against it, but they don't think it'll happen. So they're trying to get it in by July 2nd. So compliance probably won't be an issue.
Khalil, you have your hand up?
Thank you.
Thank you, Jared. One of the issues I see, and we've talked about this before, if there were to be in 24 a moratorium of fishing for striped bass or the keeping of any striped bass, it's going to be, and I would support it, but it's going to be. I mean, let me back up. We did have a moratorium, and people still continue to fish, and they're fishing quote unquote for bluefish and fluke and et cetera, et cetera. So I think I think the law enforcement's going to have a little bit of a nightmare in their hands. People are still going to fish. People are still going to take their boats out. They're still going to fish, even though they know they can't keep or they're not supposed to be fishing for striped bass. It's going to be one of those unintended consequences where, yeah, I'm fishing for bluefish, but I happen to catch this the striped bass. That's what I see what might happen. But I would be in favor of a moratorium if we had to move in that direction.
Well, anyway, that's a long way off, and let's hope for the best.
Right.
So,
Exactly.
any other clarifying questions from the commission? If not, I'll go to the public. Okay, do we have Chris McCallson and Matthew Hart? Do you guys have any questions, and would you like to make any comments? Raise your hand if you do. Go ahead, Chris. You
Hello,
unmute
can you hear me
yourself.
okay?
Yes.
Excellent. Hi, everyone, and thank you for the update. Just a quick question of, just to clarify, what we know for certain that it was the recreational fishing. I'm just curious how we know that it was recreational fishing and not, something to do with environmental or other thing beyond the control of the actual fishery.
Sure. Mike, do you want to come back on that one?
Sure. So the increase in harvest that's documented through the MRIP survey. I think maybe what you're getting at, this bad recruitment is not because of us. There is plenty of spawning stock biomass that goes into Chesapeake Bay. It 100% has to do with environmental conditions in the bay. And they've been either droughty or very wet for the last 4 or 5 springs. And those are bad conditions to create year classes of striped bass. They depend on a really complex interplay of the fresh and the salt water. And if it's too wet or it's too dry, that kind of interaction doesn't go well and you get poor year classes. Does that answer your question, Chris? There is definitely environmental components, But this actual increase in harvest was pure and simple recreational anglers.
Excellent. And I think it's just, I'm trying to understand how we know it was a recreational fisher person, like that, I guess I'm trying to understand the technical piece of that.
If I'm getting your question, so the commercial is held under a very hard quota, and we have a commercial fishery. But there's a lot of checks and balances on what they land. And as soon as they hit the quota, which is based on science, the fishery is closed. That's not the case for the rec side. We set bag limits and size limits and hope they hit the target, but we don't know. And the other part of your question is the catch rates, they can be affected by, they certainly are affected because there's a huge 2015 year class and they're very available. But they can also be more available because there's lots of bait inshore. They can be available because there's pools of water that are cooler or warmer or whatever they want. So they move around a lot, and some years they're more available than others. Last year could have been, the perfect conditions of a big year class, and they were all inshore because there was a ton of bait inshore last year.
So Chris, do you want to make a comment now that you have the floor?
No, I will hold for now and hear if there are other questions.
Okay. Yeah. Matthew Hawk, do you want to make a comment or ask a question? Matthew, I think you can unmute yourself. No? Is it, Jared, do you want to engage the chat in case he can't, because it looks like he's unable to unmute himself, or maybe he doesn't have a comment. Matthew, can you raise, are you not sure what to do, Matt?
Well, if there's a comment, you can send in comments to our public email by 5 p.m. next Friday.
Okay.
Or if you have any follow-up questions, you can also write us at marine.fish@mass.gov, and it will be forwarded to someone on this call who is most appropriate to respond.
Yep. So Chris, we're back to you since we can't engage with Matthew. Do you have any comments you'd like to leave us with?
No comments at this time, but I will think about it, and we'll make sure that if I do have one, I meet that deadline.
Okay, well, on the board right now on the screen is the email address for our general mailbox, and we'll leave the public comment period open till 5 o'clock on the last day of June. So thank you for attending tonight's meeting. Thanks to Mike Armstrong for putting that presentation together and showing a whole lot of leadership on this issue and helping the ASMFC get through this. Obviously, we'll see more issues brought forward in August when the PDT develops its range of options. As Mike said, we hope we could have the work accomplished sufficiently so that there could be a document out on the streets by the fall so that we could enact the rules in time for next year. I mean, we obviously want to avoid having a lot of last minute rule changes. It takes us the better part of a winter to get the word out fully to the angling public. And even then, there's some we might miss. And this particular size limit change was very challenging because of the last minute nature of it, but we're working diligently to try to get the word out through various means. So without any further comments, if there aren't any, then I guess we can close the hearing. So thank you very much for attending.